So the absence of hyperscaling very big tech companies in Europe is the root cause for our relative decline in wealth, in growth and in wealth. And we're talking about two handful of companies, 10 companies, not more. Then the question is, why don't we have these hyperscaling companies where market caps is not in the tens of billions, but in the trillion or even in the trillions?
Hendrik, you are in the business of venture capital. You, by nature, are probably an optimistic person. Tell me, what makes you optimistic more broadly? Just we're living in these crazy times. Are you an optimistic person? What makes you optimistic? Maybe bring me into your world of being a venture capitalist. How do you, what's your outlook like in general of what's happening in this world?
We're investors in technology, and the advancement in technology, the progress is so impressive. It's going so fast that I think that contains good reasons for remaining optimistic. One, if not probably the most important problem of our time is global warming, because it puts, the environment at danger in which we are living, and it might not be as much a livable environment in the future if we don't get that under control. I do believe that there are raising evidence that we can get it under control with the help and on the basis of new technologies. There was a long time the discussions whether economic prosperity and growth can be combined with climate protection. And I think the advancement in new technologies and renewable energies, in clean energy such as fusion and the like, make me increasingly optimistic that combination is going to work. And the combination is important because without growth, I think social peace is not so easy to maintain. So if we can get that combined, and we will see a rising wealth in a climate protected environment, that is I think an outlook which makes me cautiously optimistic. I do know that we have lots of problems as we speak, and we are for sure not yet there. But I do see the tangible opportunity that it might work. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can drive it down and we can make it wrong, I know, but as you say, I'm a structural optimist, so I hope we're going to find our way.
Mm-hmm. But what do you tell people who are not so convinced of that idea? Because you just pointed out, right? There's people who may not be so convinced of having a sustainable world while also driving growth. What do you tell those people, just out of curiosity? Maybe even younger people. Have they maybe even noticed by now?
Yeah, you can also look at the glass can be half empty, half full. Yeah, and I encourage people to look at the positive sides. Yeah, and it is so easy to just talk about what is wrong and where the issues are, and they're omnipresent. We all know them, and it might be way more difficult to retain, the firm belief that we are on a good way. And, we have started to identify the issues and work on the issues. One of the best problems is if you look at the current German government. Yeah, there is absolutely, there's no one is not complaining. Yeah, and they say, and on the other hand side, one could look at it, I think, also quite differently and say, for the first time, things are starting to move. People say nothing, no movement. I think it's not true. There is movement, and we may look back at this era like we look back at the era of Mr. Gerhard Schröder, who only got the credits of his reforms once he was not in office anymore. I do think there are a lot of change of direction in a good sense in a very, very difficult political environment, which can also be appreciated. I don't see that appreciation, no, not in the media, not in the broader country, which I perceive as a little bit unbalanced, I must say. And I try to convince people to also look at it's not on the bright side of well, but to just try to read the indicators that things are changing. It takes time, and it is probably now the most difficult phase to be in, because it is still bad, and we have to suffer from the measures which hopefully create a better world in the future. So we do the painful investments now while it is so bad, and we do not see the improvement. So it is probably no one else more important to be optimistic as it is now, and to just advertise it and try to get that across and convince people that this is the only way forward.
It's interesting because we talked about media very early pre-recording, and venture capital firms being in media, and I've just also watched VC firms, I think from Lightspeed, justifying why they're hiring people who do media. And one of the reasons is actually that there's people who are capable of conveying the topics that are discussed in venture capital to a broader public, and maybe encourage more people to be optimistic, right? Is that something that is missing? Because if you look, probably you've noticed it, right? In college campuses, right? People are booing when these big people come and talk about the opportunities of AI. So there seems to be a sentiment across the entire population, which is not only positive, right? How do you bring that optimism to the broader public about technology? That's something I'm very curious about. Do you see that point?
I see that point, and I think it's daily business for us. We try to bring that optimism across. The only thing what we can do is to bring our arguments forward and let people know that we are firm believers that there is not only reason for optimism, but also that, the advancement in technology and the support of the advancement of technology is the only way forward. And at the end of that way, we're heading to a better world. I mean, I do say, and it's within our mission and vision, we're investing in companies which have the potential to change the world to the better. And I personally think there is absolutely no alternative. There are people who think the world has been a better world in the past, and we try to get back, but there is no way back. We cannot go there. We only can go forward, and we can try to find a way which mitigates the way forward, so that it does not have the negative impact many people are so afraid about. Singularity and AI and what have you. I fully get that. But the reason, or the solution, is not to ignore AI and say, we just regulate it and it's not going to happen. The ghost is out of the bottle. I mean, there is absolutely no way not to have AI. There will be AI around. And the way forward is to get that mitigated, to get that ring-fenced in a way where we can harvest and use the positive and control the negative. And there are obviously both opportunities. Yeah, AI can be misused. Can be misused in the context of warfare. Can be misused in the context of criminality and to manipulate and dominate other humans. I fully get that. But AI is also the key to increase productivity, to offload our burden of daily work, in our key to longevity and a longer, healthier life. There are many aspects. So let's try to make use of the good aspects and control the bad ones. And that is possible. And if we firmly believe, and if we want that, it's going to happen. And we have to convince it. We have to take the people with us. Yeah. And advertise that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I'm very keen to later, go also into the companies that you guys are investing. And I'm very keen to maybe get a picture, what a tangible, maybe offer that stage for this optimism, right? So I'm very curious to understand how can your portfolio companies actually have that positive impact down the road. Maybe one question in between would be, tell me, so you're an optimist. I would also consider myself an optimist. It's great to be an optimist. I would rather always be an optimist. Great attitude. Do you have
optimists have a higher life expectancy? You know that, right?
Well, great.
It is. So being optimist is also pretty self-serving.
Yeah, you should. I mean, you should be an optimist. I totally agree with you. But I was wondering, is there maybe reflecting on your past? I mean, we could do an entire podcast about your past. I don't want to do that. I mean, it would be lovely, but I think that would just go beyond the scope of this session here. But is there something in particular from your background that explains why you're an optimist and maybe explains your state of mind nowadays investing in these disruptive technologies? Is there something that has shaped you from your past that explains why you are this way?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't think so that I can anchor that at a certain experience and or phase of life in life. I mean, I have always been very interested in technology and passionate about machines and what can they perform. That's why I went to university and in that area. I'm an aerospace engineer by training. I loved that. And does that necessarily imply to be an optimist? I don't think so. I think it is. Probably it is in the DNA. Maybe because I had the privilege to grow up in a very loving and healthy family environment, where I was very protected and always had. It was not very wealthy, by the way, but very, 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 very healthy. And I always felt things are going to become good and probably better than they were. That has always been transported, even in my youngest childhood.
Mm. So you rather had, because I did part of my homework, and there was this FAZ article where you said you were 30 and you thought you could walk on water.
Yeah.
What was that all about? So was it rather that you were maybe too optimistic in some instances, that you were maybe, optimistic in
I made
sense?
the experience. I made the experience that up until then, everything worked out pretty nicely. And so if I focused on things, have it been in the university or my initial jobs at Airbus or later on at McKinsey, what I had in front of me, I somehow was able to achieve in a way that I was happy with, and that obviously drives then maybe too much self-confidence, because one tends to believe that this is going to remain for the remainder of the life. One will always, whatever I have in front of me, I will achieve. This is definitely not true. So this is why I said that in the FATS article that when we started early, but I was elected to partner at McKinsey in record time, and in the university, I was actually the best of that vintage of my year in the Technical University of Munich and in aerospace engineering, etc., etc. So it was always well, and I thought it's going to go on, and then. When we started early, but I felt it's different. It was very difficult. And I had to learn the hard way that money is shy, and regardless how smart the concepts are, or not smart, or whatever, or well-looking the concepts are you present, money remains to be shy. It's show me your track record, and in the absence of any track record, it's very difficult to win the trust of people. And get started. So I think that over years of also frustrating experience was on a personal level probably a pretty healthy experience, because it clearly told me I cannot walk on water. Definitely not. And there was a very tangible risk of a significant failure. But fortunately, we were resilient enough to just keep on going, and then we've been fortunate. Back then there was the first internet bubble coming up, and when that coming to the surface, all of a sudden, I call it the madness of the crowd. The sentiment was so much changing that missing track records were not an issue anymore, and it was rather FOMO. People were afraid to miss the train, and we got all the trust, which I must admit we in reality didn't deserve at that stage, but we could get started, and fortunately we had the opportunity to make something out of it, and this is why we're still around.
Yeah, I mean, you were one of the few survivors of the .com bubble, right? And Daniel as well.
Daniel as well.
Right?
So
you guys
he wasn't. Daniel is more as a person than as an institution, because the institution was not around back then. But I think in 2000 there were in the BVK, the German Venture Capital Association, or the Private Equity Association, there were more than 100 venture firms registered, all founded in the second half of the 90s. And out of these, I think we're 107. There are 3 survivors, which is still in the lists. And Early Bird is fortunately by far the biggest of the 3. We've probably have done something right, and I must also say we have been very, very fortunate in many dimensions. But I think this is probably also the experience in an entrepreneurial life. If you take here and there some good decisions, the circumstances may help you then also as well.
Wonderful. Hendrik, I mean, something that is oftentimes being said is that are we maybe in the midst of this madness of crowds again? I mean, now we've seen the SpaceX IPO, we're seeing these huge investments into AI companies. Is there anything, I mean, you've been inside the .com bubble, right? Is there anything that worries you, or is there anything, or do you see any parallels between these
yes
two
and
times?
No. Yes and no. I think if I zoom out and look at the exploding needs of compute and tokens and how we handle that, and that we're building data centers, we only measure the size in energy consumption. We build 100 megawatt data centers, and soon there will be 300 megawatt data centers. This is, probably the capacity of a small nuclear plant. So in future, we need to build a data center and nuclear plant side by side in order to get to manage energy consumption needs. I come to the conclusion that that must be reaching limits here. So this, for me, that doesn't feel healthy. I think we have to jump out of this crazy route of ever bigger data centers with ever bigger energy consumption. And if I then look at the enormous investments in data centers of the US hyperscalers, I think in 3 years it's $2 trillion collectively. That's amazing, and these enormous investments can only pay off if these data centers are going to be used for a decade or so. Yeah. On the other hand side, if that is then taken into relation to cash flows and to market caps of these companies, it becomes a little bit more reasonable, yeah. And said, even though if they would have to write off half of that, it's probably not worth nothing. So if collectively the hyperscalers in the US have to write off $1 trillion, that is not an existential crisis. That would be a setback, yes, but it's not really a substantial crisis. So is it as crazy if I look at the substance as the dot-com bubble was back in the 2000s? I don't think so. I do believe that we will be seeing setbacks in the hype of the context, especially of large language models. But I think, generally speaking, the speed of innovation, even in our days, and what can be achieved with AI is so much bigger than what could be achieved with the internet, with the inception of the internet or the mobile internet back in the 2000s. That I would not compare the two hypes. I think it is more fundamental right now because the innovation is more fundamental and is quicker than what we have had back in the 2000s.
Could you tell me precisely why is it? So it could be that the investments in data centers will not pay off, if I'm not mistaken. Could you explain to me how that risk would look like? What is the risk behind it exactly? Just
start with first of all with the chip technology. I mean, what if in 2 years there will be photonic chipsets available, AI chipsets with an energy consumption, also watt per flop, or flop per watt, it doesn't matter, which is probably 2, 3, 4% of what current NVIDIA chips consume. If that would come to market, and I see this relatively likely that's going to happen. I think this is a likelihood of over 50% that's going to happen. What do you do then with a data center using 30 times more energy than a new data center going to be built in 2 or 3 years? What do you do with the old one? Can that still be profitably operated? I'm not so sure. This is one dimension. And I think it is extremely courageous to invest so much money, which needs to rest on a relatively stable outlook of for sure more than 2 years, probably 7 to 10 years. I think there's a significant risk that they might not that the business plans for these data centers will not come true, especially not in the second half. Other consideration could be that what is going to be the prediction for usage of large language models? Are they going to be as compute intensive as they are now in the future, or are we going to see more of these DeepSeek moments where people all of a sudden say, we achieve similar benchmarks with 1% of the compute intensity, just because we have smart architectures. No one, I think, on Earth will be able to exclude that. Even here, I would say it is more likely than unlikely that we will see significant model innovations, which will bring down the need of compute or by 1 or 2 orders of magnitude. If that happens, do we then still really need the accumulated capacity we currently build up? I'm not so sure. There might be individual assets which perform well, but collectively, across the board, I'm not so sure whether that is going to be profitable. But again, the good news is that the companies who are doing these enormous investments, they can afford to partially write down then the assets without bringing themselves into existential danger.
Because we were talking about space, and there's also the idea or currently data centers being built in space, as far as if I'm on the right track here. Where do these data centers sit within what you just said? Is there a difference, or?
Yeah, it's totally different. I mean, data centers in space are predominantly used for compute in space. So for applications, so with the rise of the space economy, we will be having lots of applications in space. And obviously, if we do certain compute tasks in space, we can reduce the communication to Earth. So if you have fully computed signal being brought back to Earth, it's different than you have to transmit, the raw data and do the compute on the Earth. I'd be way more efficient. Second thing is obviously if we find good ways to scale energy generation in space, access to energy in theory is way easier and way cheaper in space than it is on Earth. Obviously, you have no clouds and you have no nights. You can use solar power 24/7. You have much higher yields. On the other hand side, you have lots of other problems. Cooling is a huge problem. People think it's cold out there, but it doesn't help because you have no material. There's since it's you cannot bring out the energy through convection. It's only radiation, and cooling through radiation is way less efficient than through convection. So, but there will be solutions for it. So I do think it's interesting. Is it such a clear-cut case and that all of a sudden terrestrial data centers are going orbital? I don't think that is going to be the case. There will be special tasks for which that makes a lot of sense. There are quite some hurdles to get that implemented. It's not easy. I think they will be solved. But it's probably it's just one of the future applications in space.
Interesting. You mentioned earlier on the space economy. And obviously SpaceX, there was this huge IPO, historical IPO very recently. And I mean, it's difficult to make sense out of it, right? First of all, in terms of, at least if you look at the valuation, it seems very high for someone who's maybe not looped in what the space economy has to offer. Do you have any thoughts on that SpaceX IPO and beyond that on the space economy that you would like to share?
So, I'm happy. There's a lot to say about it. So first of all, I'm fundamentally optimistic with respect to the space economy. I think the space economy is going to be huge. And we only see, the scratch on the surface of what's going to happen there. Starlink gives you a sense what can be achieved, access, ubiquitous access, internet access through space, data network. You can, Starlink is becoming a mobile network operator, independent from terrestrial distribution through towers. You get it from space, Earth observation, then you go further into orbital production. You can manufacture certain things in the absence of gravity, so that's the right word, in the absence of gravity, which you cannot manufacture in the same quality and way on Earth. So we will be seeing more of that. There is the fantasy of energy production, orbital energy production, orbital photovoltaic power plants, bringing back energy to Earth. So there's so much up and coming. The fantasy, doesn't know any limit. It's really, there's always a limit, but it is really, it's becoming huge, and that is reflected in this enormous variation of SpaceX. SpaceX has been priced at, roughly 100 times revenues. And if you look at analysts, they say there is no historical, or almost no historical example in the past of companies IPO'd at 100 times revenues, which have ever made money for the investors. One can then say, can you change your position and say, look, if we now see and factor in the mega deals SpaceX has recently closed with these Anthropics and NVIDIA and what have you of these worlds, and the almost secured revenues, and factor those in, that brings down the revenue multiple quite quickly to something like 20x. So, and then I remember the Facebook IPO, was it in 2012, I think, which came public also with a revenue multiple of 20x, and I was back then thinking, what have the people smoked to invest in this IPO? And right after, share price came down by 50%, and I felt so right. If we look now at the situation, I don't know what, the meta valuation is, but I think it's probably 2 trillion or something like this. So it's maybe 20x of what the initial IPO price has been 14 years back. So 20x in 14 years is a pretty good performance. So that has been a good investment if one would have done participation in the Facebook IPO. I just want to say, and the business potential for Facebook, I think, wasn't that good in comparison to what we see in the case of SpaceX. SpaceX is also SpaceX is holding a monopoly. And you can only participate in the space economy if you have the logistics under control, if you can bring up and down stuff, The only company who can actually do it in an industrial scale right now is SpaceX globally. So they have, for the time being, they have a monopoly on the future space economy. I hope that this is not going to last. We will see other launches coming up, other logistic companies making it possible to compete with Starlink and other services. But for the time being, it's a monopoly for in the potential market, which is huge, and that is reflected in the IPO price. Is it right or wrong? History will tell, and I will not position myself here. And I have not bought SpaceX personally. I have also not shortened it. I'm just sitting on the fence and am impressed and observe.
Yeah. But you guys at Early Bird are also in the space economy, right? With Isar Aerospace. So in the sense,
yeah, absolutely.
In the space economy. Yeah,
we're trying to build an alternative to SpaceX. A European alternative. This is our mission. I mean, as I said, I think the sky's the limit. This is really, really big, and we try to get that done. And I think odds are good. So I'm overly optimistic. I'm almost certain that the Isar Aerospace Spectrum 1 rocket will reach orbit. Is it in 1 month? Is it in 6 months? Is it maybe even in 9 months? I don't know. I think it is for sure within the next year. What Isar Aerospace is doing really in a great way is that they thinking about this not as in one-time prototype development, but rather as an industrialization. Looking at a future space economy, and so I'm cautiously optimistic that that remains to be a very attractive investment.
Mm-hmm. Isar Aerospace has recently raised a lot of money, right? Tell me, again, you just mentioned that Isar Aerospace has somewhat of a different approach than SpaceX. What makes Isar Aerospace so special also in Europe, right? What makes Isar Aerospace as a company right now so interesting to follow?
I think they not necessarily have a different approach than SpaceX. They're simply a decade later. Yeah, they're probably 10 years behind or 8 years behind or whatever it is. What makes me so optimistic rests in the first place on what I said before, the huge potential in the space economy and the conviction that one can only participate in that huge potential if you have an own launcher. Because otherwise, I mean, everybody, or not everybody, a lot of people can make a concept for a lower orbit satellite constellation, which may contain, I don't know, 5,000 satellites. Space, I think, Starlink is going to approach 10,000 now, but even if you do it with 3,000 or 5,000, you're not going to have the ability to position that constellation in orbit if you do not have control over an own launcher, because there are not enough launching capacity available on the market, on the free market, to be bought. Yeah, obviously, in earlier days, you could have even go to Russia and try to use Soyuz for launching. These days are over, and even nowadays, I observe that people get increasingly concerned to make themselves dependent on American launchers. So SpaceX is a needed partner, but not a loved partner, especially if it comes to governmental satellites. SpaceX is requesting the full disclosure of the technology. If you want to fly with SpaceX, that's obviously something you do not want to do with your governmental satellites. we have made or seen the experience that the American administration is willing to make connections where one should not make a connection. Just think about you, a big European company trying to launch with SpaceX in 2027, and then and you have other interests in the US, and the government may say you can for sure take your launch slot, but only if and when you we would expect that you do not lay off people in the US. No one is 100% certain that this is not going to happen, and that leads to a huge interest to, if possible, fly with European launchers. And there's obviously a huge shortage. So if now Isar Aerospace can push into that gap and vacuum and say, look, we are the one and only industrialized European launcher, and you can avoid a lot of problems. I think this is a very interesting position to be in.
Who are these companies that are customers of SpaceX, Isar Aerospace? Who are these companies that we're talking about?
There are a lot of companies. I mean, obviously one is the resilience area. So governments are in the area of significant defense investments. They're all building up capabilities in space. So governments are a huge customer. Huge customers are also large companies. It starts with mobile network operators who may want to have satellites to provide services in rural areas where it is way cheaper to do it from orbit than do it from the Earth. It goes on then, if you think, for example, think about automotive companies trending into autonomous driving. If you're using the current GPS system, which is high orbit, the maximum accuracy you can achieve is plus minus 10 meters. This is the military accuracy, and this is pretty impressive if you consider that these satellites are flying on 20,000 kilometers in height. But if you go down to lower orbit, 500 kilometers, you can achieve something like plus minus 1 centimeter. Obviously, you can imagine in traffic, 10 meters plus minus is a big problem. Plus minus 1 centimeter is not. So everybody who really wants to be a significant player in autonomous driving has a very, very, very high interest to get hold of a lower orbit GPS system or a navigation system. Goes on in Earth observation. Yeah. You can quality control, problem detection of pipelines, of power lines, early fire detection for so there's so many applications. And next thing then you can think about chemical and pharmaceutical companies because you, as I said, you can manufacture certain things in space which you cannot manufacture on Earth because of gravity. Semiconductor companies, you can manufacture certain high-end wafers in orbit, which you will never ever be able to manufacture on Earth. So they're all very interested customers. Collectively, the interest of launching services probably 10x of what can be provided right now, especially in Europe.
It's fascinating, Hendrik, and I really appreciate that you're sharing that with us and educate us about it. I think. Do you see that, by the way? I mean, you also live a regular life when encountering people, or maybe when you meet people not from your industry, that it's just totally not on their radar. Sort of the impact of that space economy. Is that?
Yeah. Obviously, I do see that, and I also sense the fascination which comes along with all things which happens in space. And it's interesting if I have the opportunity to explain a little bit what I feel to understand, or what I'd like to, and what I believe that I understand. and then people, and all of a sudden it demystifies a little bit, what's happening in space, and because things are so rational, and so the thing is, why is a lower Earth constellation? Why does it have thousands of satellites as opposed to 12 or 18 in higher orbit? Yeah, it's just because of the coverage you can achieve with one satellite. If it flies closer to Earth, obviously the space you cover with one satellite is way smaller. On the other hand side, you have the advantage of a very shorter travel time of the signal and better quality. Or why, if you then talk about why, if it is so, why don't you let satellites then fly even lower at 100 kilometers? Or why is a satellite on 500 kilometers way faster than one in 20,000 kilometers? So why doesn't a satellite fly, I don't know, every 40 minutes around the Earth if it is a lower orbit satellite, and you take multiple times in higher orbit, and in 36,000 kilometers in height you're geostationary, so you rotate exactly with the same speed as the Earth is rotating. So if you start explaining, and it makes so much sense, it's just physics, yeah, and people start to understand, and it demystifies it a little bit what's happening there.
Absolutely. Hendrik, we're talking also obviously a lot about SpaceX, the US. You are with Isar Aerospace contributing and helping to get a European player into the ecosystem. You also have a strong position on when it comes to building relevant companies for the European future, or from Europe for us globally even. What's your view on Europe? What are we doing? Maybe what should we improve in comparison maybe to the US? You probably also are very looped in what's happening in the US, especially with in the space economy. What's your opinion here?
I mean, I think most telling is the comparison between S&P 500 and our Euro stocks. If you look at the two indices, they have been pretty much on par with their performance up until 2010, 2011. And since 2010, 2011, there's a gap widening. So S&P 500 is running away, and that gap has accumulated to 3x as of now. But if you then go one step further and take out by market cap the 10 most valuable companies on both sides, that gap shrinks. And if you just take, the last 7 years, it totally disappears. So the absence of hyperscaling very big tech companies in Europe is the root cause for our relative decline in wealth, in growth and in wealth. And we're talking about 2 handful of companies, 10 companies, not more. And if you then boil that down, I mean, I'm German, to the German economy. German economy is roughly 20% of what the US company is. So we're talking about missing 2 companies to actually make it up to par with the US. And then the question is, why don't we have these hyperscaling companies where market caps is not in the tens of billions, but in the trillion, or even in the trillions if you look at SpaceX? And is it possible to build similar hyperscaling companies in Europe? I personally believe that is possible. And there's actually no way around, because we're living in times of extremely concentrated growth. This is very much different than to the era of the second half of the 90s, of 1950, 97, first German Wirtschaftswunder, where, the growth was resting on 10,000 of Mittelstands companies, individually growing in double-digit figures year by year. That time is over. Today, growth is driven by very small number of extremely large companies. And because the investments are so significant that they cannot be done by, if they are distributed, they're subcritical, collectively subcritical. So in order to fulfill the needs of these enormous investment in the new technology, it has to be concentrated. So, and up until now, Europe is basically not participating. We have, in the US, there are currently seven centacorns, so companies with more than 100 billion in market cap, private companies. In Europe, there's none, or maybe recently one with Revolut. I think I heard the last Secretary of Trades, they were at 110 or so. But it's not a trillion. Yeah. It's, and it's one. So question is, what needs to be done in order to let us participate here as well? I think it is possible. The good news is I think it is possible because that possibility rests on technological capabilities, and the technological capabilities in Europe are absolutely on par. We're not behind. It is we have the brilliant brown minds, and we can do. What holds us back is, in the first place, I think, our ambition, our missing ambition. I think there are too many people I'm cleaning in front of my own doorstep. So, and also holds true for venture capitalists like myself, who are so happy if they have built a unicorn, and if they build a decacorn, the immediate discussion is take your money and run. Yeah, so we have achieved our mission. Let's take and realize the money and go home. But we have to acknowledge, if you look at the US, that would be the beginning of the journey, not the end. And we're making it to the end when others start really creating value. And the simple mathematical logic is, it takes you probably, I don't know, a decade or 8 years to make it to a decacorn, and it may take you another 2 or 3 years to make it to a centacorn. So the value creation is way higher in the tail end than it is in the beginning. So if the journey is actually starting, to cut it off is absolutely stupid. And that goes back to the ambition. The second thing, what holds us back is, I think, stupid regulations. The Europeans are so good in regulating things before they even exist. Before they're so afraid that things may go wrong, instead of creating test beds and experimental rooms to let things grow. My most sad and favorite example here is Lilium. Lilium was an eVTOL created in Munich, a great team, technology absolutely superior to every other competition globally, but it failed because people were perceiving that the final €1 billion of R&D capital was missing. On the surface, that is true, but what is under the surface is that the regulatory requirement from the EASA, the European regulatory authority for air traffic, the EASA required a security level for Lilium 10 to the power of -9. Which is the same security level which you ask for an Airbus. Helicopters are certified with a security level of 10 to the power of -6. So 1,000 times more risky, simply because of the fact that helicopters are a pretty risky tool. And if you would go up and ask for higher security level, no helicopter would ever be flying. So what the US FAA did is say that since, the eVTOLs are basically replacing helicopters, vertical starting and landing, and also the flight range is comparable. So we apply the 10 to the power of -6, while the Europeans felt security is never wrong, so let's ask for 10 to the power of -9. Between these two security levels, there is easily a billion of necessary development cost and years of development. So my statement is, if the EASA wouldn't have done that crazy ask of for this security level, we would be seeing a Lilium certified and flying as we speak, and conquering the global market as a leader because the technology has been superior. It is extremely sad, this example, and it speaks for many others, where we just shoot ourselves in the foot by by doing too much of regulatory regulations and killing good innovations by not giving them the room to breathe. So, and thirdly, we need obviously the capital to fund innovations in a way that they can compete on an international level. So I think I give you 3 numbers to imagine how how much we have to catch up. The average investment in Germany per inhabitant in venture capital or in growth is 70 euros. The same number in the US is 800. So more than a factor 10. If you look at the last OpenAI private funding round, that had, I think, $122 billion. And if you then put that into relation to what was the collective investment in growth in the entirety of Germany across the entire year of 2025, that was 8.4 billion euros. So 8.4 billion, make it $10 billion to 120, but 120 was one company, one round. 10 was the entire economy all rounds for a year. And that is something we need to solve. Again, it is solvable. It's not so that Europe does not have the money or does not have the capital. The predicament is that, again, regulations, it's not all regulations, but regulations play an important role, make it relatively unattractive, for example, for institutional investors to allocate the money not in government bonds, but in growth. And that can be changed. I think the government should think about methodologies. I made a proposal, others made other proposals, and it doesn't really care which proposal is finally being implemented, but it is important to change the incentives for institutional investors to make them allocate more into growth instead of government bonds, because this is for the prosperity of our society crucial and important.
Wonderful. Hendrik, thank you very much also for making it so tangible with these examples. It was wonderful. Thank you very much. Really, really goes to show what needs to be done in Europe. Final question very quickly, which I like to ask is there any misconception, maybe in the broader public about anything you're doing, about the space economy, anything you would like to share with the audience? Maybe something on a positive note.
Oh, misconception. I don't know. I think I don't know. I think, I'd like to advertise for optimism and say, we do have the opportunity. I think I quite often hear that people telling the train is out of the station. We have missed the train again. AI is lost, and space economy is lost. And I really perceive that as a misconception. I think that's the worst thing we can do. I would take it on a high level and say, look, we do have the intelligence, we have the brilliant minds. We still have the capital. Look at how many of the brilliant minds in the US are Europeans leading and building super companies. We can do it over here as well. It just needs the commitment that we get going. And if we are committed to change things, we will see its impact. And quite often, I think it takes time. You're not going to see things overnight, But at times things have a more impressive impact than one would expect. I mean, I bring it back to the politics. When Gerhard Schröder lost the election, and he had created this work at those labor market reforms, no one was ever believing back then that these reforms will induce in a decade of prosperity for Germany. Yeah, and the reforms he has initiated back then are, relatively speaking, way smaller than what the current government is going to do, and hopefully is going to do. I keep my fingers crossed they should, but what at least they claim to do. So I think the game is anything but lost. We need to just do it and attack the problems, and then we're going to be successful.
Wonderful. Hendrik, hey, thank you very much for your time, for your wisdom, for sharing everything, and wishing you all the best, and also your companies at Early Bird.
Thank you. Bye, Tobi.
Thanks.